Bill Belichick in dating Jordon Hudson is setting himself up to get fired as soon as after this 2025 season. Like, that's not a hot take. That is reality. If you think I'm stupid, if you think I'm just some loon right now spewing nonsense, give me a few minutes. Let me explain why, because I think after you hear my explanation, after I lay it out for you, I think your tone will change. Also, I want to be able to use the news of the day on Sunday to help orchestrate my point about Bill's buyout and why that's a big factor here as well. But the reason why I say that Bill in dating Jordon Hudson is setting himself up to get fired is because the deeper this relationship gets, the more Bill changes. And Bill Belichick changing from who he was is not good at all for UNC. It is really bad. It's just like those commercials you see for fast food burgers, right? The commercials make the burger look delicious. Juicy patty, fresh veggies, a nice toasted bun. And then you go race to the fast food restaurant and you see what's in front of you. The real life thing, like, oh, this is not what I was told I was getting. False advertising, right? It happens all the time, but it's kind of the same thing here, right? Look at what UNC was told, what they were advertised they were getting. They were told they were getting a 6-time Super Bowl champion. They were told they were hiring one of, you could argue, the best defensive mind in all of football. You thought you were getting a coach who always had his teams prepared and flourished in those minute details of finding the small differences between winning and losing and always having his teams ready to go. You thought you were getting a coach that cared only about football and nothing else, right? That's what you thought. That's what UNC thought they were getting when they hired Bill Belichick a few months ago. Just like you thought you were getting a delicious, juicy, big burger in any of these fast food restaurants. But honestly, right? Can you now, after a few months of seeing Bill in Chapel Hill, could you truly say that Patriots Bill Belichick is the same Bill Belichick right now we're seeing in North Carolina? You can't. You can't, because Bill has been the total opposite of everything we've come to know him. You know what he's doing? He's living out the real life version of George Costanza from Seinfeld. In one of my favorite episodes, the abstinence episode, where George's girlfriend gets sick, and part of the treatment is they have to be abstinent for 6 weeks. And so because George is always thinking about sex, now for 6 weeks when he's not, the guy becomes a genius, right? He excels in math, languages, science. Like, this guy just now becomes a brainiac. But as soon as the 6 weeks are over and the abstinence is done and the intimacy and the sex returns, George's brain goes to mush. Is the UNC has to worry about the same thing happening? A guy whose brain was abstinent for 20 years, for 40 years of anything but football. And now all of a sudden he's letting a little intimacy come in his life. And I think just like George, his brain is turning to mush, because everything we've come to know about Bill, right? A guy who hates distractions. Now he's creating them. A guy who hates social media. Now he's on it. A guy who's blurring the lines between family and football. Everything we've come to know about Bill over the last at least 20 years as head coach of the Patriots, he's doing the opposite of. I mean, this guy's legitimately jeopardizing success on the field because of distractions he's causing off of it. There's no person on this planet, I think, would be less capable of doing that than Bill Belichick. Yet here we are. This is what we're seeing. Every week there's a new story about Jordon Hudson this, Jordon Hudson that. She's controlling Bill. She's telling Bill to do this. She's doing that. She's on the field during their big spring showcase, talking to Bill. Why is she on the field? Everything that made Bill Belichick so successful, because he was so singularly focused on football, right now has made this a mess. And so if you're UNC, right, and you were told you were getting one version of Bill, and the version that's showing up in Chapel Hill is the opposite of what you thought you were getting, how can you keep him beyond 2025 if, right, the off-the-field sloppiness carries on to on the field? Where if we see Bill now all of a sudden having his teams unprepared, they're sloppy, making mental errors, not ready to play. If we see a different Bill Belichick as head coach, just like we're seeing a different Bill Belichick off the field as a person, how the hell can you keep him if you're UNC beyond 2025? You can't. This team goes 4-8, Bill's gone. I don't even think it's a question at that point. Like, are you starting to see what I'm saying? If you did not get what you signed up for, there's no reason to waiting. In part two, because it's not like they hired a project head coach. Hey, we're going to hire this guy, pretty inexperienced, but could be rocky in the beginning. But hey, we're looking at the long haul here. We're looking at 10 years. We think this guy could be a star. We want to kind of get in now and take the slow road to developing him. Bill is 73 years old. He was hired to win right now. He was hired because of all the success he's had with the Patriots, doing it a certain way. If you are not having those same ways translate to college, if you're not having that same coach that won 6 Super Bowls and went to 9, what's the point? Cut your losses and then move on. Because all Bill has done so far at UNC, and really Jordon Hudson, has brought negative energy and negative attention to the university. Why have that around for 2 or 3 years if the results aren't there? I think Bill's like legitimately on the hot seat in 2025, in part because this relationship he's in has brought out the worst of him so far, has turned him into the complete opposite of everything he stood against. Or I guess I should say, turned him into the exact person that he hated. Someone who cares more about off the field than football. Someone who carries their off-field issues on the field. Bill now, I think, has way more pressure already before coaching a game than he did back when he was hired earlier this year. If Bill's sloppiness off the field translates to lack of preparedness, lack of production on the field, I think Bill's one and done. I think UNC be justified to fire him after 1 year. That's how it's crazy to say, but that's where we are. You see what I'm saying now? Does now what I said a few minutes ago make more sense? I think it's harder to justify keeping Bill in 2025 or in 2026, I should say, if things go poorly in 2025 versus firing him, because it's hard to justify keeping a guy who is not as advertised. And what's interesting too is because the big news on Sunday, June 1st, was that Bill's buyout dropped from $10 million to $1 million. Now, this is not a shocker. This was well reported very early on. As soon as the contract was signed, this was known. This day was going to happen. And obviously, right, that was in there to make it easier for Bill to leave and go back to the NFL if he has success at UNC. And that's still the case. Look, if he turns out to be still as great of a coach with the Patriots as he, with UNC as he was the Patriots, he'll probably get hired. But what's interesting is because I think while everyone always looks at the buyout as leverage to go back to the NFL, and that's true, I think there's also a second leverage play that no one's talking about that I think does impact now Bill's future. The other leverage play here is that with his buyout now being $1 million, Bill's rich. Right? Bill has a lot of money. He was reported as being the highest paid coach in the NFL for a long time. $1 million to him is not a lot of money. I think part of the reason why Bill wanted a lower buyout and a buyout so low that kicked in almost immediately was, I think he wanted leverage, not just to hold the NFL over UNC, but also to be able to get what he wants. Hey, look, I can leave so easily. If you don't give me more NIL money, I'm out of here. If you don't improve the football facilities, I'm gone. I think where it's interesting now is because of everything so far we've seen, mostly being negative, putting UNC kind of in a bad spot here. I don't think UNC is as afraid of Bill leaving as they were, let's say, back in January. Where I think Bill legitimately had leverage of, hey, if you don't do this, I'm gone. If you don't increase NIL, I'm out of here. If you don't hire this coach and do this, that, and the other thing, I'm just going to walk. I'll pay the $1 million. I won't even leave with the job. I'll just walk away. I think now UNC becomes less afraid of that. And so I'm interested to see how the dynamics between Bill and UNC are, because Bill, is a demanding coach. He wants a lot. And I wonder if UNC is going to start pushing back because that fear of him leaving, the fear of him writing $1 million check and walking away, I think is lessened based on the last few months of distractions that Bill and really Jordon have caused and brought negative attention towards the program. That's where I think this buyout dropping is interesting, at least for 2025. He's never leaving on June 1st to go to the NFL. That's never realistic. He needs UNC. If he ever wants to get back to the NFL, he needs UNC. He needs to coach well. He needs to have a big year. But now with that buyout dropping, I think he also loses a little bit of leverage, or at least a little bit of fear from UNC's perspective, him leaving. I think that fear is lessened a little bit just because there's a sour taste, I'm sure, in UNC's mouth after all these events that happened over the last few months. So that's why I think when it's all said and done here, you look at this relationship so far and you look at Bill going into 2025 and the pressure on him, I think he's already on the hot seat. I think all of his attention has negatively impacted him and his job status to where if things don't go well on the field quickly, I think he's in real danger of getting fired to where if Jordon Hudson never existed and UNC went 4-8 and there was no talk about Bill off the field and his girlfriend, his personal life and ring videos and interviews, blah, 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 emails, that never happened. If Bill Belichick just was the same no nonsense, no distractions guy, there's zero chance, I think, of Bill getting fired if UNC goes 4-8 in 2025. Now I think there's a realistic chance he gets fired because if you're UNC, you got to start questioning, is this really the coach we signed up for? Is this the same guy we thought we were getting that with all those Super Bowls with the Patriots? That's why I think Bill's in real trouble here and already before coaching a game on the hot seat. If you disagree, if I wasn't able to convince you here over the last few minutes that Bill's on the hot seat and this relationship has really put a lot of pressure on him, comment why. I'm here to listen. Love to go back and forth. Write in your comments your argument as to why Bill has still no pressure. This relationship won't impact his standing at UNC. Drop a comment. We'll go back and forth there. Also, if this is the first time on the channel, appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe. You got college football content coming your way each and every week as we get closer to 2025 season. Also, check me out on Twitter, Ryan_Hickey and the number 3. Appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. Hopefully, we'll talk to you again soon.